Hey, well, what's up, guys? Welcome back to The Collision. Daniel here, and I'm very excited to be joined, honored by a very special guest today, the director of the new hit film from Angel Studios, The Shift, Brock Heasley. Welcome. I know this has been a crazy week for you, a lot of stuff. You just got back from the UK premiere of this movie, but I appreciate you taking the time just to stop by and chat about this film.
Yeah, of course. Thank you, Daniel.
So this is a really fascinating film. There's a lot going on in this film that I'm excited to hear sort of the creative decision making process. But before we get there, why don't we back it up just a little bit? Because I know that there's also an interesting story behind this story. Just sort of this has been a big part of your life, kind of coming up with this idea and just sort of the journey of this story from a short film to a wide release, a theatrical film. Maybe can you just share a little bit, sort of what led you to write this story? What's the history of this story?
Yeah, so it has been an 8-year journey all told, and it really kicked off about 9 years ago, actually, when my wife and I both lost our jobs within 24 hours of each other. And I had a 15-year career as a graphic designer and an art director to that point, and not ever thinking I would get into the film industry, but after a lot of prayer and a lot of trying to figure out, just what in the world to do with my life, I hit upon getting into the film industry, which meant after several months of unemployment to continue to be unemployed because nobody makes money when they first get into the film industry, especially where I come from. I'm in California, but I'm in Fresno, California, which is the part of California that most people don't know about. I could not be further from LA in terms of like connections to the industry and things like that. So it was a daunting task. But within about a year of making that choice and making that pivot, I made a $500 short film called The Shift, and it was I approached it as kind of a lost Twilight Zone episode of a battle between a man versus the devil. And I had a different way into that story. It's a pretty classic tale, man versus devil. We've seen a lot of that in movies and different stories and things. But I really was interested in the point of view of a Christian. What would happen if a Christian got involved in something like that, and how might he approach that? And so that was really the short film. And I considered the story complete. It wasn't something that I was angling to make into something bigger because I really was just trying to get my feet wet in terms of writing and directing. It was the first thing that I wrote and directed, and but it turned out a lot better than expected. And when Angel Studios saw it, I submitted it through their online system and just blind submission. When they saw it, they were really intrigued by it. It fit tonally with some of the things that they were doing. They were starting to just gear up a show called The Chosen at that point. They hadn't even shot any episodes, but they were gearing it up, and I was familiar with it. And anyways, they saw The Shift, and they were just like, "What? Is there more to the story?" And by then, I did have a few ideas for how to turn it into a feature film. So I said, "Yeah, I would love to make this into a feature film." And they said, "Well, we'd love to help you do that." And the way that Angel Studios puts films together or helps creators put films together is through crowd-funded investment, which is very different from like a Kickstarter or something like that, where people are kind of basically throwing a little bit of money in order to get a T-shirt or something. This is different. This is people actually being able to invest into a project, which is kind of a new thing. I mean, previous to just a few years ago, if you wanted to invest in a movie, you needed to be a very wealthy individual. Well, the SEC has opened that up now so that a lot of people can do that. Just a regular person can throw in $100. And so that's what we did, and it took some time. It took a few years to build an audience and to help people to understand what this movie is, because it's not based on a pre-existing comic or a TV show or anything like that, or a book. It's a brand new story, and it's kind of a genre mashup. It's a sci-fi movie, it's a thriller, it's a romance. It's got this faith element, and so it took some time to get people to understand exactly what we were doing, and so that they would want to invest in it. And so all told, it took about, from the time I made the short film until the time we actually started rolling film, was about 7 years. And then it's been another year since then, and so here we are 8 years after that short film, and the movie is out in theaters right now.
Yeah, and like you said too, that this is a genre mashup. It's not what you would typically expect from a film that is exploring this subject. I know there's lots of Christian fantasy, whether stories or movies, but there's just not a whole lot of sci-fi, kind of from a Christian perspective. Maybe share a little bit about that. Like, what is it about sort of the sci-fi genre that just in your eyes like has potential to explore big questions? That's sort of what the genre does best. What drew you sort of to sci-fi for this particular story?
Well, I've always been a huge fan of sci-fi. I mean, that's my favorite genre of film, and to be honest, it's the world's favorite genre of film. If you look at the top 10 films of all time, 7 of them are science fiction films. So, for
Wow.
me, when it comes to the kinds of stories that I want to tell, I'm going to gravitate towards the things that I love, and what I love is science fiction. Now, at the same time, my faith is important to me. And so, a storyteller should tell the types of stories that interest them and that are important to them. And so, it seemed like a very natural fit because if you think about science fiction and you think about like what it actually does, like there's really nothing you can't talk about through science fiction. Science fiction provides metaphors and allegories that are not available elsewhere. You think about, for example, Star Trek is a great example. Star Trek, especially when it first originated, it is so great at tackling like the social issues of the day. You can see, issues like racism and poverty and things. You can see it play out in this futuristic spaceship setting. And these things are tackled in this setting in a way that it brings everybody to the table across the political and social spectrum. And they can enjoy this story and talk about the principles and the truths and the issues that it raises. And so, there's no reason that we can't talk about faith within science fiction and use those metaphors and use those potential for allegories and things like that. There's just such, I mean, look, that's what fiction does. Fiction is about, yeah, it's about a fun ride. It's a fun story, and that's the primary objective. Like, I want to entertain you as a storyteller, and if I'm not doing that first, then none of the rest of it matters. But every story and every piece of art has a message, whether the artist even intends it or not. It's going to happen because who they are comes through that. And so I don't know why there haven't been a whole lot of science fiction stories like this in the terms of like dealing with faith seriously. But to me, it makes a whole lot of sense to do it.
Yeah, because even like I know like C.S. Lewis had a space trilogy, but it's hard to think of a lot of
Right.
Christians that have done sci-fi. But you definitely see the inspiration. Even you got the Blade Runner like voiceover, a lot of this classic stuff in this film. Another thing, because you just talked to us sort of about the inspiration that this is a fictional, it's a sci-fi, but it's also very clearly inspired, sort of a modern reimagining of the biblical book of Job. I want to ask you about that because that's an interesting book as a source material for this. It's a very unique book in the Bible. It's a book that there's a lot of discussion about, but it's also one that seems to deal with a lot of very universal human experiences of suffering and faith. What was it about the book of Job in the Bible that seemed like it was perfectly suited to sort of play around with and sort of provide some new imagery for?
Well, the shift is about for those that don't know, the shift is about a man who he's an ordinary guy. He's having some frustrations in his marriage, some frustrations in his job, and then he has this encounter with this mysterious stranger known as the benefactor, and the benefactor. That encounter, it doesn't go so well, and as a result of that encounter, this man ends up banished to a dark tyrannical parallel Earth where he is then fighting to get back to his world and to the woman that he loves, his wife. Now, I say that description and people are like, that does not sound like Job at all. And they're right. It doesn't sound like Job. But Job, as you just said, Job's story is kind of, it's really our story. It's kind of universal. There's so much there to pull from. And as I have studied Job and studied his story within the context of all of ours, we sometimes think of Job as, this incredible tale of unimaginable and unrelatable suffering. I think it is unimaginable, but I don't think it's meant to be unrelatable. What really intrigues me about Job is that he starts the story as someone who is very faithful. So faithful that all of these things are put upon him, and God knows exactly what he's going to do, which is he is not going to turn his back on his faith. What we don't know about Job is how he became faithful. How did he become a person with that kind of strength of faith? We don't really know. And we can assume, though, because we're mature, educated people, that Job has probably been through some stuff in his life, even prior to the beginning of the story, because you don't have faith that strong unless you've been tested and you've been proven. So it's really interesting story in that here's somebody who's already believed, and he's put through all this misery, he's put through all this stuff. And the thing is, though, is that as I was thinking about my own life, and I'm thinking about the lives of people I know, that's everybody's story who's a believer, is that we all believe, and yet our lives are not just hunky-dory. They're not just fantastic and easy. It continues to be difficult, and we continue to grow and to learn. And so when I was thinking about the short film, and I was thinking about how that short film ended, it really ends at this point where Kevin has had this incredible manifestation of the power of God, and he realizes like what is real and what is true, and he has this incredibly faith-building moment. And I thought, well, wouldn't that be an amazing first act for the film? Like, let's get him to this place where he believes, and then let's drop him off a cliff and let him feel like he's been abandoned, like Job was, and then put him through a Job-like experience and see what happens. So when we talk about the shift being kind of a modern, being a modern retelling or being rather inspired by the book of Job, I really think of it as Acts 2 and 3, that is kind of telling that Job story. And I think what's been interesting in the response is that people are really hooking into that part of it. They're really seeing themselves in Kevin. Our guy's name is Kevin, not Job. But they're seeing through his experience and through a world that, it's a little bit darker than the one we inhabit, but it's familiar enough that I think it brings the story of Job into a new perspective, into a new space where people can say, oh, you know what, that guy's not that much, unlike me. And this is my journey. This is what I'm dealing with as well.
Yeah, and there's something I think unique too. I know a lot of stories that focus on just themes of faith and belief tend to focus on the conversion, the starting from no faith going to faith. But there's something unique about this film that it starts from a position of faith and then explores just the trials that we go through, just through the hardships of life and kind of holding on to that faith. You mentioned another thing a little earlier, just about all films come from a perspective. No film is really neutral in that sense. I did want to ask you. I know fairly, sometimes not fairly, films that do deal with faith or Christianity or any kind of religion. They have the stigma of being preachy. They have the stigma of just sort of pushing messages, and again, whether that's fair or not. Was that something that, as you were making this film, was that a conscious thing that you thought through, or as far as how can we explore these important spiritual questions in a way that maybe doesn't make the audience feel like they're attending a church service?
Yeah, well, like I said, the primary job is to entertain, and if you want a Sunday sermon, then I think you should go to church on Sunday. That's really what it's there for. And if we're giving sermons and we're being preachy in a movie, well, then we've missed the mark, in my opinion. We're going to turn off a large portion of the audience. And honestly, it's that portion of the audience that I'm trying to reach. I'm trying to reach the people who probably, look at faith films or films that deal with faith, through squinted eyes, and maybe they kind of back off from them. Because those people, I think they're like me, in that they're seeing what's available out there, or what has been available for years, the types of films that are out there, that are a little more preachy, a little bit more didactic, that are a little bit more, just trying to offer comfort and not really challenge that much. I think they probably are, a lot of people are like me, and they look at those films and they say, not for me. Which isn't to take away from the power of those films or the people that love them. I mean, that's great. I mean, I think there should be a variety of options for different moviegoers. Everybody has different tastes. But for me personally, I'm not looking at a lot of the faith content, the kind of stuff that I think that you're referring to, this preachy stuff. I'm not looking at that, and I'm not gravitating towards it. It's not speaking to me. I want to see stories that are more about provoking a conversation than are about, oh, here's how you should think, and here's what you should believe, and here's this sermon within this story, as though the story is a secondary part. I want the story to be the primary part, because I have a church that I go to on Sunday, and that is where I get sermons. And I think also, there's a potential to, you want to reach people where they're at, and not everybody wants to sit through a sermon, but they'll sit through a great story. And my hope is with this film is that we've done it in such a way that, yeah, I mean, we're dealing with some pretty big issues with issues of faith and God and the nature of evil and suffering and why are we going through these things. But my hope is with the shift is that we're dealing with it in such a way that a lot of people can come to the table and say, you know what, I'm not necessarily a believer. I don't believe anything at all, really. But I'm in for a good sci-fi story. Like, show me that. And if you want that, then yeah, we've got that for you. And I've been really encouraged that we've heard from so many people who aren't believers even, and saying, I love this movie, because they're seeing it as analogous to their experience in life. And really at the core of it, the movie's about struggle and hope. And everybody can identify with that.
Yeah, and I wanted to ask you about that too, because I know obviously you can't please anyone with any work of art, but it seems like this is a movie that has got a very positive response. And even to see people that are outside of sort of the Christian, the believer community, just mainstream, Hollywood pundits or whoever it might be, actually wrestling with this film, talking about this film, and just having a discussion on social media. The film's been out for 2 weeks now, so you've been able to see some of the responses. How has that been? How has the response to this film? Like anything that surprised you or just stood out to you as far as this hearing from audiences that have seen this?
Yeah, the response to this film, I think, has been about as unique as the film itself. We have people who are absolutely in love with this film. We've had an incredible number of reviews on IMDb and even Rotten Tomatoes from the audience who are just over the moon in love with this film because it is giving them something so different. I think that's part of it. And the other part of it is that I think this film has ended up a much more emotional experience than maybe even we, the filmmakers, were anticipating. People are really having a moment with this film. The other thing that's been surprising about it is how many people are seeing it more than once. I really am interested in films that make you think, and that as well as entertain you. I'm not interested in a film that you walk out and the first thing you say to the person next to you is, "What do you want to eat?" I want a film that you have to talk about. And if I'm going to make a film, if I'm going to spend 8 years of my life on something, it better be something that isn't just come into your head and then just leaves and then that's it. And I think I overachieved a little bit in that respect because people are talking about this. It's not letting them go. So many are going back because they feel like there's more to chew on. There's more that they missed, and they want to see it. They want to discover those layers. And that's really exciting because the conversation around this film is happening. And the other thing that's happening that's really interesting is the people that are watching this film and aren't caring for it that much, that it's really challenging them in a way where they're rejecting it. And that's a much smaller percentage, but it is happening. But within that percentage, there's this other group that for one reason or another, they aren't going back a second time. People who didn't care for the film too much, they go back. Maybe they get coerced by somebody or whatever, and they go back into this movie and they see it a second time. And there's this switch that happens, and they fall in love with the film. I just read a review last night on IMDb where somebody said that just straight up. Like, I saw it for the second time, and I went from not really caring for it to absolutely loving it. And there's just something about this movie that is rewarding another watch. And I could have never predicted or anticipated that. I mean, you hope for that. You hope that you make a movie that has some rewatch value because those are the movies that we love the most. But this movie seems to have that, and it has that in a unique way that it is causing people to rethink the movie when they see it again. And then I think the record right now is 12. There's a woman that's seen it 12 times. And she swears that every single time she's seeing something new in this movie. There's enough there to uncover. So that's just been really exciting. It tells me that The Shift is a movie that might be one of those that people kind of revisit over the years and talk about it for some time to come. And wouldn't that be amazing?
Yeah, and even just anecdotally, I had the chance, Angel Studios let me view this movie early to do a review. And as soon as I finished it, I actually texted my brother, said, hey, as soon as this movie comes out, I want you to go see it because I want to just hear your thoughts and I want to discuss. It does seem like a movie it opens the doors for discussion in any, regardless of what you sort of feel about the the film itself. Maybe this last question, and this might not be one that you can necessarily answer. I know you're right dab in the middle of this movie coming out, and your focus is here. But maybe just looking ahead. I know this is your first film. This is a film that's been a part of your story, that's been a part of your life for a while. But any thoughts for just what's next? Will there be a second film? Is this where you feel God kind of leading you, or was this a one-off thing? Any ideas that have kind of been brewing for the last while?
Yeah, no, I definitely wanted to be prepared for this moment. I think it's, look, I want to tell more stories. This is what I feel like is for me. Writing and directing films look, I enjoyed this so much. It was the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. But things that are hard are often very much worth it. And so I would love to continue. I've got another script that I've already written. It is also within the sci-fi space, and it also has a bit of looking at faith a little bit. And it's something I'm very passionate about, very excited for. It is very, very different from The Shift. But that is a place I would like to explore for a little while, and hopefully the audience is there for it. But I definitely am ready to keep going and hope to do so.
Hey, well, looking forward to all that you have next. I hope people continue to go see this movie. It's still in theaters, so if you're watching, haven't seen it, go check out this movie. But thank you so much, Brock. I know you're tired. You've been doing a lot, but I really appreciate you just taking the time to just share from your heart about this film.
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much, Daniel. I appreciate it.